Hey church family, let me start by saying this. I miss you and thank you. I miss you because it's been several weeks now since any of us have seen one another. I miss having Sunday service, in-person life groups, and other life-giving gatherings. For reasons that we all know, this has not been possible for some time, and that's hard on extroverts like me. So secondly, I want to say thank you. Thank you for weathering this storm. Thank you for adapting to a new chapter in all of our lives. Thank you for finding our online services, for sharing them, for helping others stay in touch and following Jesus in new ways in this season. Thank you for your giving. Thank you for remembering the mission of our church to help people become more like Jesus, and for giving back to God from what He has given to you. Thank you for having a heart to help others, even when we aren't really going outside and we aren't really sure what that looks like, so we're all trying to figure it out together. Thank you for those who have been sewing masks for people to have PPE, for those who have continued to support our vital partners in our community, and for those who simply reach out to one another with a kind and needed word of encouragement. Thank you for those in our church who serve as first responders, National Guard, fire department, medical community, and more. Thank you. I want to take a moment to give you an update on our church and what is happening as this season begins to shift into some new phases. I find it ironic that God led us to the word uncharted to define this season of our lives. When we set out on this path, we had no idea just how much that word would fit, did we? As I record this, and keeping in mind that things have continued to change very rapidly, the Denver metro area is under stay-at-home orders until May 8th. At that point, should this not get extended, our city will join our state in moving from stay-at-home to safer-at-home orders. Our governor's office has been going live with press conferences over the last week to help each of us understand what safer at home means. I recommend checking out the state's website to find individual guidance, but I wanted to outline what this means for gatherings such as our church. I, like you, am so ready to come back together. However, our guiding question as leaders through this has continued to be, what does love compel us to do? Safer at home comes with specific guidance that restricts group gatherings to 10 people or less. This means that under the current phase of these guidelines, in-person gatherings of our size are still strongly discouraged. I know there are a wide variety of thoughts regarding the true severity of this pandemic. Many are pushing for all restrictions to be lifted immediately. Others are nervous that even these slight liftings and phases are way too soon. Love compels us to have grace for those holding positions that are different from our own and to care for one another in the greatest possible ways. Under safer at home guidelines, Altitude Church will continue to meet online only for our weekend worship gatherings. The fact remains, many in our church fall into the most vulnerable categories. So far, we've had at least 3 cases among our church members of this virus. In fact, at least one person in our congregation who falls into the most vulnerable of categories is battling COVID-19 right now. While some of us have had no one in our family or friends experience this virus, others have had many. In doing our shepherding check-ins just this week, I discovered that one of our neighbors who lives by our Sloan's Lake property has lost 3 family members to this virus in the last few weeks. So what does love compel us to do? Under safer at home guidelines, love compels us to continue meeting online only for our worship services for at least a little while longer. As state and national guidance continues to come, your leaders continue to assess when we can begin to phase back into our in-person services. Since we're able to gather in groups of 10 in this phase, however, this does open up, or at least may open up, some new options. For example, life groups, the backbone of our ministry, who are under 10 people, may choose to begin meeting together in person as members are comfortable in someone's home, provided they continue to follow recommended social distancing protocols. Another option with these new guidelines, which are currently stated to go into effect around May 8th, would be that smaller groups could begin gathering in person in people's homes on Sunday mornings and experiencing the online worship service together. This would bring us back to the practice of the early church, which often gathered in people's homes. We are all fighting that itch to get back to the way things were. However, as I've met with church leaders digitally from across the globe, I'm reminded that where we are going is likely different from where we were. For better or worse, this virus has changed us, and we are entering into a new chapter in human society together. Some leaders and experts are claiming that the virus will drop off as the weather gets hotter. At the same time, others are preparing us for the possible reality that the virus will flare back up and possibly even be worse in the fall and winter. Some experts claim that a vaccine may be available as early as September of this year, while others are claiming that it will be as late as 2022 before a viable vaccine will be widely available. This is why our state and national leadership have been hesitant to give exact dates and are instead talking about phases that we enter dynamically. We may move from one phase to the next only to re-enter a previous phase as the virology changes. This approach seems wise. Our leaders have drafted a plan to reopen that follows similar flexible phases. I'm emailing that out and I'm placing it on our Facebook page and group for all to see. In the first phase, we expect that most of our services will continue to be online. We are exploring options such as doing drive-in church, but are weighing that against our ability to properly social distance and all of the needs that surround that. This previous season has been different for sure. But I want you to know there have been some big wins that we can celebrate as a church together. While it's difficult to truly measure engagement online, we have seen an average amount of people engaging in the services week by week that exceeds our normal in-person attendance. I've heard from staff and from members of our church several stories of people who they were trying to get to come to church, and for whatever reason that person wouldn't come to our building, but they've been watching online every week. One even shared that his neighbor, a devoted atheist, has been popping in here and there and likes what we're doing. We've seen people in our community begin to engage in the church that never took part in things before. That is a huge celebration. In talking to one retired pastor this past week, he said plainly to me, to not be losing ground, but gaining any ground during this pandemic, that is a huge blessing. So let's celebrate that. When you share our service videos, start watch parties, and tell your friends about our online worship experience, people are listening. People are hopping in. And when they do, they're experiencing the hope that can only be found in Jesus because of you. Of course, there are aspects of the online service that can clearly never replace gathering in person together. However, I think we can all recognize with new insight just how crucial improving our online engagement is and will be going forward. Some are looking at online church as a temporary band-aid that's necessary during these times. However, the reality is that online was already the front door of the church. We have opportunities to reach people online that may have never stepped foot through the doors of a building. Therefore, continually improving our online presence will be an ongoing focus for the entirety of our relaunch. In the second phase of this plan, we will begin meeting in person with strict social distancing guidelines in place. Most wise church leaders speaking into ideas such as this expect that we will have to consider our sanctuary full at around 25 to 50% capacity in phase 2. It's for that reason that we are going to begin planning multiple services and multiple venues. We anticipate that when we reopen for in-person services, we will have our first service beginning at 9 a.m. During the 10 o'clock hour, we will be deep cleaning our facility, including sanitizing all handles, tables, chairs, and etc. In this time, those life groups that are used to meeting at the church campus will be welcome to meet under proper social distancing guidelines. We would then have a second service that begins at 11 a.m. Should the need arise, we're also planning on live streaming the service into our gym to allow for more people to come together under needed social distancing guidelines. During phase 2, we will not have separate kids ministry services. Instead, families will be encouraged to worship together during this time. I believe that our Altitude Kids ministry is absolutely fantastic for our little ones. However, we foresee it being very difficult to enforce proper social distancing guidelines with a bunch of 5 to 10-year-olds who are crazy and just want to see each other. So during this initial phase, we'll help families worship together, and we'll be investing in unique elements for kids to engage the service like never before. We also want to ensure that this online service continues to be as engaging as possible for people who are vulnerable or maybe who are still feeling that in-person gatherings are just too big of a risk. Volunteers, especially those in our First Impressions ministry, will be required to wear masks and gloves during phases 2 and 3 at least. And our gathering areas, as I've mentioned, will be deeply cleaned before and after each service. I believe we're going to see many new people, both in person and online, connecting to our church as they search for hope in this next season. Altitude Church isn't just a place to come and sit. It is a mission to engage. God is calling us to reach real people that God really loves with real hurts, habits, and hang-ups. As we come back together in person, I want to challenge you, whether you're 8, 80, or 800, God has a role for you. Jesus modeled to us that his followers are those who serve. So as we come back together, we will be working to equip more people than ever to find a serving role that makes them come alive. Whether that's standing in the parking lot holding a sign, whether that's helping to moderate an online experience, or whether that's getting ready to help relaunch Altitude Kids. God is ready to use you in bigger ways than you could have imagined to bring real hope to real people that God really loves. During phase 3, we will continue meeting in person with more moderate social distancing guidelines in view. We'll continue to offer multiple services, however with a 50 to 60% full capacity in view, and maintain our overflow, our secondary options in the gym. Should it feel wise to reintroduce Altitude Kids, we'll begin utilizing a larger group style of kids ministry for that season. This may mean meeting in larger gatherings in our downstairs area, or utilizing the gym to allow for proper social distancing. Again, our online efforts in this season will continue to grow and improve as a key focus of our ministry work. During phase 4, we would then move to lighter social distancing guidelines. While we expect keeping multiple service options, we will at that time re-examine the service times to make sure they're working best for when people most desire to gather. In this season, we'll revert back to the 80% feels full guideline that churches used pre-COVID-19 to see whether we need more or less service options. That's just a summary of what we expect we'll experience. But as our theme for this 2 years has proved more prophetic than we realized, we are in the uncharted. The most important thing to keep in mind is that we will all need to remain flexible. Should things clear up more quickly, we may be able to lighten restrictions. However, should the opposite happen, we may need to move back to previous phases to ensure that we're being safe, caring, and wise. We will continue to ask ourselves the question, in light of our current circumstances, what does love compel us to do? I've been asked by some to give an update on our relaunch, on giving, and on the state of the sale of our Sloan's Lake property. As a reminder, the mission of this church, which will be more powerfully reaching into people's lives than ever, now and online and in person, as we come back together, it's fully funded by your generous giving. As we continue our relaunch process, we expect that our desire to become a center of hope in our community will be more needed than we could have ever anticipated prior to this pandemic. So when you give, you fund the life-changing ministries that have come to define our efforts, as well as those that will become new and greater focuses in our relaunch. When it comes to giving, there's definitely both good and challenging news in this season. Giving has been down during this pandemic, but the good news is it has been stable and steady. Our leadership has put some measures in place to ensure that we're able to continue to reach people with the hope that can only be found in Jesus, but with some restrictions in place on spending and contingency plans should giving drop due to further economic realities. Once again, I want to thank those who faithfully give to support the mission of the church. When you give, you don't just keep the lights on. You allow us to empower new leaders, new innovations, and give more opportunity for people to discover hope lives here. When you give, you also support our ministry partners in our community and our efforts, which will ramp back up in person as restrictions lift, to battle sex trafficking and to give real and tangible hope to people who have seen the very things that they put their hopes in this prior season crumble around them in this season. When it comes to our relaunch plan, I want to assure you things are still moving forward, just more slowly than we expected. Ironically, when doing a replant such as what we've been doing, one of the most common recommendations that experts offer is to shut down the building for a season. We didn't mean to do that. We didn't plan to do that, but it did happen. As our facilities sell, we're still looking to find a new facility that we're better able to use to empower life-giving ministry in this new and upcoming chapter. Our relaunch, like our uncharted theme, has proven to be more timely than we could have imagined. All churches, as well as businesses and nonprofits, are facing a whole new world with a different set of paradigms. Our relaunch has been preparing us to make needed pivots in a timely manner. God has set a course, and we couldn't have anticipated how much our musings over needing to find new ways to reach people with the unchanging gospel would prove to be exactly what all churches are now scrambling to discover. A few of our planning teams have continued to meet here and there during the pandemic. Many, however, have hit pause until we can come back together in person, and even more than that, better understand what this next season might actually look like. I am very excited for the future of Altitude Church. History has shown that during times such as these, people return to God in greater force. We were already asking questions about what our ministry must look like now as we relaunch. And now all churches, businesses, organizations are asking those same questions together. Some have been forced into facing a new reality. We were anticipating stepping boldly into the uncharted. Because of this, I believe more than ever in our relaunch efforts. I believe that God has been preparing us for just such a time as this. While many aspects of our relaunch are paused temporarily, I believe we're going to be moving forward boldly in the near-ish future. Obviously, a big part of that plan has been the sale of our properties. We entered into a contract to sell our Sloan's Lake building in early March with a closing date of late May. Unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond their control, the buyer did have to back out of that sale last week. This is a bit of a setback, but there's great reason to hope. Prior to entering a contract with this specific buyer, we met with several interested parties. And our realtor has re-entered conversation with those parties and expects that while this will cause a delay, our sale will be moving forward again in the near-ish future. We've not entertained any offers on our Arvada property at this time. However, we continue to see how God is preparing us to enter a new property down the road. As we have more information on timelines, I promise your leadership will keep you informed. I believe that God is at work in powerful ways in the midst of this storm. I believe that He is going to guide our steps at just the right time to see us relaunch as a center of hope in our community. So I want to encourage you to continue to support the vision, continue to pray, continue to give financially, continue to serve, continue to be a champion of our online presence. God is ready to take you to a new altitude in your faith. And as He does, you'll be bringing more people with you than you could have ever anticipated. This brief recap has likely answered some questions for you, but you may have even more, or it may have opened up even more. If you have questions, be sure to join the discussion on our Altitude Church Facebook group. You can find that by clicking the Join the Conversation button on the COVID pop-up at www.altitude.church. On this page, we regularly post updates, we stay connected, and we just chat with each other in the midst of this storm. I want to end with the words that guided the start of this year. God is here. He's ready. God is going to take us into uncharted places in our faith and as a church. And I continue to live in joyful expectation that God is taking us above and beyond all that we've asked for or imagined. God's ready. He's going to use you in new and exciting ways. This is why we can say with confidence that our past no longer define us. Jesus is here, and the best is absolutely yet to come. God bless.